Hello, everybody. David Shuster here. President Donald Trump has now been called out on national television as a racist and a white supremacist. House lawmaker Jasmine Crockett, Democrat of Texas, delivered her matter-of-fact broadside against Trump on CNN.
This is very simple. We right now have a white supremacist that is sitting in the White House. He is backed up by other white supremacists. And if you really want to know who the criminals are in this country, you can Google it. You don't have to trust me. But the people that commit 80% of the most violent crimes in this country are white supremacists. Yet for whatever reason, they sit and they serve at the pleasure of the president. They are the ones that were there on January 6th, tearing our democracy down physically. And now we have them tearing us down right here from within.
Crockett was reacting to this. MAGA intellectual Darren Beattie will fill key State Department role. Secretary of State Marco Rubio will appoint Darren Beattie, a speechwriter in President Donald Trump's first term, acting Undersecretary of State for Public Diplomacy. Just months ago, Beattie tweeted this.
Competent white men must be in charge if you want things to work. Unfortunately, our entire national ideology is predicated on coddling the feelings of women and minorities and demoralizing competent white men.
Beattie has sparked controversy before. In 2018, he was fired from the first Trump White House after attending a conference for white nationalists. Crockett said Beattie needs to go and that he and his MAGA supporters do not deserve any sympathy.
That's what's happening right now. I am tired of the white tears. Listen, if you are competent, you are not concerned. When I walk into Congress every single day, you know why I don't feel a way and why you can't make me doubt who I am is because I know that I had to work 10 times as hard as they did just to get into the seat. When you look and you compare me to Marjorie Taylor Greene or me to Lauren Boebert, there is no comparison. And that is the life that we have always lived. So the only people that are crying are the mediocre white boys that have been beaten out by people that historically have had to work so much harder.
On top of Crockett's condemnation, social media users are having a field day pounding Darren Beattie and his white men tweets. Armand Domaluski wrote on X, "Is he aware his new boss is Latino?" Eric Levitz, "Trump just made this guy a secretary for public diplomacy at the State Department. I'm sure his appointment will greatly aid America's diplomatic efforts in Asia, Africa, and the Middle East, and ingratiate our nation to female heads of state everywhere." Other users on X are pointing to President Trump's hypocrisy in condemning DEI, given the inclusion and fast track in the Trump administration for troubled white men. Pete Hegseth, who admitted to alcohol abuse and paying off a woman who accused him of rape, is Secretary of Defense. Sean Duffy, another controversial former Fox host, is Secretary of Transportation and started off his first day on the job with this.
Obviously, it is not standard to have aircraft collide. I want to be clear on that.
Whew, what a relief. And then, of course, there is State Department Undersecretary Darren Beattie, a man whose writings and social media posts have been labeled as racist. Donald Trump's willingness to surround himself with controversial white men while simultaneously claiming that minorities cause aircraft to collide and crash is truly remarkable and sick. And it makes Jasmine Crockett's argument even more persuasive. Is Donald Trump really a white nationalist? Well, his actions certainly seem to bolster Crockett's point. And Crockett's willingness to make these points on live television and in congressional hearings has set her apart. Over the past several months, on top of hammering Donald Trump, Crockett has blasted Trump's congressional supporters, including Marjorie Taylor Greene, the Georgia Republican who last year seemed obsessed with Hunter Biden's private parts, has been put in charge of a congressional subcommittee supporting Elon Musk's government efficiency effort.
So the Republicans have controlled this committee. So my question is, why is it that you need to create an entirely new subcommittee when you literally could go through and do whatever work it is that you're talking about handing over to the gentle lady who has never seemingly brought up anything about efficiency? The only thing I recall from the 118th was her spending a lot of time on somebody's junk in this committee. So let me be clear. Y'all had a chance. You chose not to use it. So why should the American people be convinced that now all of a sudden, because you create a new committee that has been promulgated by a real oligarch, You're talking about Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi. They were actually duly elected, not somebody sitting there buying Twitter and just happened to be the richest person in the world telling y'all what to do. Let me tell you something. Y'all need to find some people that actually care about their constituents. And honestly, whenever y'all are ready to work, we on this side of the aisle have always been ready to do what is right by the American people. Instead, what you can continue to do is go after the most vulnerable in our country.
A few months earlier, in another hearing, Crockett opened fire on Marjorie Taylor Greene, misinformation, and Donald Trump's claims of patriotism.
You know, what is wild to me is that this word patriot seems to be getting co-opted for propagandists, because that's what they do, all right? So we're going to talk about what my colleague from Georgia, she talked about misinformation, and I don't know what she was talking about, but nevertheless, we can look at her own tweets and we can find plenty of misinformation, but we're just going to go through one specific tweet. Now, she said that we need to work with Israel to track down the serial numbers on any U.S. weapons used by Hamas against Israel. Dr. Snyder, I may be going out on a limb, but are you aware that that was actually just propaganda that was put out and there actually were not U.S. weapons that were being used by Hamas as she attempted to insinuate in this tweet?
Yes, I mean, obviously what you have is a typical example of American-Russian messaging where the implicit idea is supposed to be we shouldn't give weapons to Ukraine because they're going to end up going somewhere else. There's no evidence for that. It's hard to think of an example where American weapons have been leveraged with such success as on the Ukrainian battlefield.
Thank you so much. In fact, for some people, especially people that serve on the committee, they may be surprised to know that it's actually a former Russian president and Putin's sidekick, Dmitry, and I don't want to slaughter his name, so I'm going to say Dmitry M., who actually she quote tweeted. See, the problem that we're having, and the reason that we're bringing up Russia as well, is because Russia is a threat as well as China. So we are not going to sit here and pretend as if it's only one or the other. But the biggest problem that we have is we have people that sit in this chamber and they spread the misinformation. If it was left in Russia or China, whatever. But the problem is that you have people that sit in positions of power and they have a $2 million budget. You think that they would call on some staff to find out if they were telling the truth about the things that they're putting on social media, but instead it works for their rhetoric. And as we talk about rhetoric, something else that was appalling to me was this insinuation that when you look at the Ukrainians, which is why we're having problems getting the funding that Ukraine needs, is because people in this chamber push misinformation and disinformation. They want to talk about the Ukrainians got all of these Nazis. Well, let me tell you something. You can find Nazis anywhere. You can find them right here in the United States. In fact, a bunch of the people that they're calling victims and prisoners of war, also known as convicted felons from January 6th. I have an article that I'd like to enter into the record by unanimous consent that says neo-Nazi January 6th rioter pleads guilty.
Without objection.
Thank you so much. So here's the point. We have people in this chamber that are actually causing just as much a threat, if not more of a threat, to our own country. We should be talking about holding our very own accountable for the misinformation and disinformation that they are spreading, whether it's coming out of China, whether it's coming out of Russia, or whoever is peddling it. It is a problem because right now what we see is that people are dying and we cannot get the support that we need from the public because they continue to peddle lies. And I'm tired of it because I didn't come to this chamber to play games. I came to this chamber to answer to the people, the American people, and to make sure that we keep the American people safe. And if we don't get something done, as they talk about the border, I do want to be clear, the only reason we haven't gotten funding for the border is because they killed, the House Republicans here, killed the bill that they actually sent us from the Senate side. If they want to do some work, let me tell you something. The Democrats are ready, and it seems like the Senate Republicans are ready too. They just need to get to it and stop peddling Putin's lies. Thank you, and I yield.
In that one hearing, Crockett described Trump and his supporters in Congress as Putin puppets, peddlers of misinformation, racists, and hypocrites. Crockett makes a compelling case on each, and she serves as a reminder that as bleak and depressing as things may seem under the second Trump administration and the Republican Congress, there are at least a few Democrats who are fighting back. Whether it's in a hearing or live on television, Jasmine Crockett is fearlessly leading the charge, and along the way, Crockett is giving Democrats and America a glimmer of hope. By the way, President Trump's poll numbers are now dropping over his migrant worker deportations.
Detained 3 folks there. There were citizens that were actually in the establishment as well. One was a military veteran who showed his ID. They still questioned him anyway, even made mockery that the ID may have been fake.
Check out that video at the link below. It generated a lot of comments on YouTube. One of the most popular is from Pat, who wrote, "Elect a clown and then you get a circus." Indeed. I look forward to reading your comments about Democratic House member Jasmine Crockett calling Donald Trump out in hearings and on national television. I'm David Shuster. Thanks for joining us.